I'm going to tell you a few things about beer. Specifically, beer here. This is the Brooklyn Brewery, located, of course, in Brooklyn. This is our logo. Pretty cool, isn't it? This is our beer. The original recipe was taken from turn-of-the-century Brooklyn. I've since made a few modifications to the recipe myself. I'm the current brewmaster. But hold up. First, I want to tell you about our beer. Which means I'll need to tell you about Steve. And Milton. And Brooklyn. And our staff, too. Don't worry, I talk fast. In the early 80s, Steve led the romantic life of a foreign correspondent in the Middle East, accompanied by his wife Ellen, and subsequently his two children, Sam and Lily. Good beer was not only hard to come by in the Middle East, it was often illegal. So a friend lent Steve this. Perfected techniques on the ebullition of sugar, water, and suitable catalyst to form an acceptable Aramco assimilative and imbibable potion appropriate for consumption. A homebrewing guide with a purposely confusing title, concealing that it was, in fact, a homebrewing guide. For Steve, things were never the same.
I used to get really excited, and sometimes I would drink a little too much beer.
Well, after sitting behind Egyptian President Anwar Sadat during his assassination, waking up to mortar fire hitting his hotel, being abducted while accompanying a UN patrol, and finally getting an ultimatum from his wife to accompany her and the kids back to the States or else, Steve packed his things and left for New York. More specifically, Brooklyn. This is what he found.
The only beer available in the early 80s was mainstream beer.
Steve started to think to himself, how did this happen? Brooklyn used to be a mecca for great European-style beer. In 1898, there were 48 breweries in Brooklyn, clustered around the areas now known as Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and Bushwick. So what happened? Prohibition. Not one of the great European-style breweries survived. In 1976, the last of the breweries in Brooklyn, Schaefer and Rheingold, finally closed their doors. Doesn't taste so good, does it? At the time, Steve was working as an assistant foreign editor at Newsday, and he had a vision of his future.
We wanted to bring brewing back to Brooklyn and make a beer that Brooklyn could be proud of.
So Steve kept on homebrewing with the help of his neighbor, Tom. Tom was assistant vice president, moving up the ranks at the chemical bank.
Tom thought it was a ridiculous idea.
Some people will look at the name and they say, Brooklyn beer, what's that? Brewed in the Gowanus water?
He had studied the beer industry. He knew the big guys were getting bigger and the little guys were being driven out.
Yes, I know because I was a home brewer myself.
First time I saw Garrett, I was flabbergasted. He was wearing a cape.
It was a 19th century French lieutenant's greatcoat, not a cape.
Oh, okay.
Potter's a banker, or was, until Hindi convinced him to bring beer back to Brooklyn.
These are nice and fresh.
So they both quit their jobs and took the first steps to starting their brewery. Steve, being like most journalists, totally unintimidated about approaching anybody for a scoop, approached arguably the best designer in New York City.
He says it was hard to see me. I think that's nonsense.
When I called his office, this woman, Eva, answered the phone. She wasn't going to let me talk to Milton.
I'll see anybody who walks in off the street.
Eva was very officious, like a commissar.
I think it's part of his mythology.
Milton not only designed the iconic logo we use to this day, but he gave Steve and Tom some sound advice as well.
I wanted to call it Brooklyn Eagle Beer after the newspaper edited by Walt Whitman.
Of course.
I said, forget the eagle. Why take a bird when you can have the burrow?
Steve listened.
He was right.
Steve believed the borough was on the verge of a renaissance.
I don't think anyone envisioned all these hotels going up all around us. The artists were the real pioneers in this part of Brooklyn, and artists drink a lot of beer.
The word of mouth, of course, was spectacular.
May New York never again be without a brewery. 1, 2, 3.
He has an honest job now.
And brewing was brought back to Brooklyn. And Steve and Tom chose to do it in Williamsburg. In fact, someone once proclaimed, Steve and Tom helped make Williamsburg hip.
I'm not sure Mayor Bloomberg is the guy to be defining hip, but I'm glad he said it.
As Steve set out to build a brewery, he hired me to be the brewmaster.
Garrett's an amazing guy. You know, he wrote The Brewmaster's Table, and he's editor-in-chief of the Oxford Companion.
As far as I could tell, he's completely brilliant at making beer and understanding beer, fashionable in his own way.
He's an incredible chef. Garrett begins a lot of his talks by saying he's on a mission from God.
I am on a mission from God, Steve.
I think it's from the Blues Brothers, isn't it?
My mission? To make Brooklyn beer delicious, adventurous, and available to the people. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. We have an incredible staff. They come from all over the world, and they've brought their unique interests and hobbies into our lives too.
I like bird watching.
I enjoy fist battles.
J'aime jouer au tennis.
Death metal, punk.
I like fishing.
Underground hip hop.
Stand-up comedy.
Broadway shows and the Muppets.
I like my turtles. This right here where I'm standing is where I met my soon-to-be wife.
And maybe Brooklyn itself has taken a cue from Grandmaster Milton when it comes to its own self-worth.
As soon as anyone heard the word Brooklyn, they felt well inclined towards the subject.
And we're proud of that. Our beer is served around the world, from Austin to Stockholm to Melbourne to Seoul. And everywhere our beer goes, we go too. And we hang out. And we party. And we tell stories. Steve especially likes to tell the Brooklyn story to our new team members.
You know, he says, wait a minute, you were there when Sinat got it? What was that like?
But I think the thing we can say we're most proud of is we help bring good beer back to Brooklyn. And as far as our previous billionaire mayor is concerned,
Hip, am I hip? No, my job is to go beyond hip.
Shucks.
I'm an OG.
You can just like reach over, look at it, and then put it back.
I don't want to do that. It's too much like an advertisement.
You got it.